Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video where today I'm going to be reviewing the penultimate episode, episode 9 of series 11 of Doctor Who. It Takes You Away. So yes, we've almost reached the end of the series now, sadly. We had the penultimate episode last night, and of course the episode I'm going to be focusing on in this video, It Takes You Away, which is I really enjoyed it. It was a fascinating sort of conceptual bonkers piece of Doctor Who. I think one of the best things about this episode is you could only do it in Doctor Who. Like no other TV show could have done the sort of a sentient universe that manifests itself as a frog, and having an anti-world in between, anti-zone even in between worlds, and it's just bonkers. It feels something right out of some of the crazy classic Who ideas that you have. It really is just something that only Doctor Who could do. So yes, this episode is of course set in the lovely sort of Norwegian countryside, something that I cannot remember an episode set in Norway before in Doctor Who, so that was quite nice. It had a nice kind of Scandi-noir vibe to it early on in those sort of Norwegian forests and everything, kind of quite sort of creepy and eerie, and you're not quite sure what's going on. This mysterious house, a sort of cabin in the woods almost style of thing to set up this episode with. And of course we had the blind girl, Hannah, I think her name was, which and she put in quite a reasonably good performance. I mean, she didn't exactly have a huge amount of work with them to do, and she very much was playing a sort of scared little girl, really. But I think it was done quite well, apart from the fact that there was maybe a little bit too much focus on her blindness. Like, it felt like that was the only important part of her character. Like everything revolved around her blindness, her not being able to read what was written on the wall, her not realising it's speakers rather than an actual monster. It was all very much completely linking back to her being blind. So I think maybe that could have been done a little bit better. But she still was kind of quite a sort of heartwarming character. It's good to see that sort of representation in episodes of Doctor Who as well. So I thought that was done quite nicely in this episode. Of course, it was one of those episodes where I just kind of really didn't know where it was going. It kept on twisting and turning, and everything wasn't what it seemed. It was very much an episode that I didn't know a huge amount about, but was very, very intrigued as to what might happen, and it kind of was made it out as some sort of Scandi-noir episode with a house in the woods and some mysterious monster that's trying to attack and take people away from this house. Was what it seemed like on the surface and what the sort of previews of it and everything suggested. And then actually it was none of that whatsoever. It was straight away I was intrigued. As soon as we saw that it was actually speakers and not a real monster, I was so like confused and just like, what on earth is going on right now? It's like, what actually is the sort of villain of this that's sort of mastering all of this and orchestrating all of this? It was just kind of really confusing but intriguing and kept on drawing you in because you didn't know where the story was going to take you to. Because then we ended up in this anti-zone, which is a great idea, by the way. I love this as an idea. This idea of a little buffer between sort of worlds so that the worlds don't collide. You've got a little section in between where they sort of get stuck either side of, so that so the two universes can never come together. Like, that's a properly great sort of Doctor Who-y kind of idea. That just idea of a universe between universes, a sort of world between worlds, to try and keep things separate so that the whole universe stays in balance. That was very effectively done, and it was a very, very creepy and eerie setting. The set that was built up in there for that was really, I thought, really well realised. These sort of really, really dark caves, and the use of a lot of kind of sort of dark red colours as well. I think almost in some senses trying to make it sort of a metaphor for hell to some regard, and kind of the world between worlds. I thought it kind of gave off that sort of vibe, particularly with that sort of red alien as well, whose name does now escape me. I know I'm a terrible Doctor Who fan, but that just all gave that sort of vibe off of a very dark and sort of sinister area that's very much an area that nobody's supposed to go or supposed to be in between these two worlds. So I thought that was a sort of clever idea, and that wasn't even almost wasn't even the main focus of this episode. So it showed how much this episode was just sort of brimming with ideas, that you sort of had this anti-zone idea that wasn't even the main part of it. But I do feel like that's very much where this episode sort of properly got going. It felt, I wouldn't necessarily say slow to start off with, but very much it was sort of setting the scene a little bit and trying to kind of build up the mystery and the intrigue of exactly what's going on. Obviously then we get this little sort of portal that we don't know quite what's going on there, and trying to understand and work out what that is, and you keep on wanting to know more and find out, so it really kind of draws you in as a viewer, I think, this story. and it's just very effectively done in that way because you're never quite sure what's going to happen next. And then obviously the stuff in the anti-zone, that was all really, really nicely realised, as I say. That villain was quite sort of clever, in this sort of wheeler-dealer trader kind of guy who somehow ended up inside an anti-zone, having to bat off these just death moths that would just sort of fly in and eat everybody's bones or eat everybody's flesh, as I should say, which was a nice sort of little threat to add into that. The one intriguing thing in regards to that was there's filming pictures of another monster that didn't actually turn up at all, who was filmed in the anti-zone. There's pictures of it, but it never actually appeared in the episode. It was completely deleted. Another alien was completely removed from this episode. So I'll be interested to see if we get some deleted scenes on the Series 11 box set. If this alien actually comes in, maybe is he something to do with the moths? Is it another plot point that was just sort of taken out for time or something? It's just kind of weird that seemingly a kind of significant monster that clearly had some time put into the costume and everything was just completely gone from this story. So clearly, there could be another story to tell sort of within this story that we might get to see in the deleted scenes in the future. And so obviously we get this anti-zone, this fantastic sort of concept for about 10 minutes of the episode, and then suddenly we're shot back out through the portal again, back into a kind of mirror world, a reverse world, at least what it seems like. I think it's really cleverly done that they kind of switched all the cameras around, so it was the same sort of room and setup, a lot of it, but it was almost kind of mirrored, done in reverse to try and kind of completely throw you off, but also make it feel familiar, because it is the same set. It's clearly the same set they've used to film on, just kind of rotated the cameras around and changed the whole angle and look of it to try and make it feel different and really just disorientate and confuse you, because I think that's a lot of what this episode is about, is trying to kind of drop those red herrings and try and lead you down the wrong path so that you get really thrown off as to exactly what's happening. It's just kind of one of those kind of really confusing, mind-blowing sort of episodes where you keep on trying to keep up with what keeps on changing throughout this episode. And then once we get into this new sort of world, this new universe, seeing that it looks pretty much exactly the same as our own, and then we meet Eric, this guy who the father of Hannah, who has randomly disappeared, and it turns out that he's found this new world by accident, that where his wife is still alive, and it just suddenly you're like, okay, what? Quite kind of, again, really confused. And of course Grace turns up as well, and we realise this is some sort of alternate world where the dead people can come back to life and sort of live in a form, a sort of digital fake form, really, because that's what this universe is able to sort of create. And so I thought that was just another confusing but really clever idea to bring into the episode as well. And so having finally at least started to work out what's going on in this episode with this idea of a sentient universe, the solid tract, but this idea of solid tract energy that can never sort of clash with any energy from this universe, and if they cross over, both universes will destroy themselves, essentially, is a fantastic idea. Just a bonkers idea of a universe that is sentient and can take on a form and has feelings, and the whole universe can be like that, is just remarkable and crazy. And how can you even come up with an idea like that, really? And then it gives obviously the opportunity to be able to bring back sort of old characters, and Grace being one of these, and sets up some fantastic scenes for Graham. I think Graham is one of the stars of this episode. He really kind of takes the lead on this, and as soon as he meets Grace, obviously it's such a struggle for him, having to fight, sort of desperately wanting to be with her, because she is, in a way, everything that Grace was sort of when she was alive, just not a perfect copy. Very, very close, but not that perfect copy. And so there were such fantastic sort of heartbreaking scenes when the Doctor's desperately trying to convince Graham that it isn't the real Grace. But Graham finally realising that obviously that she is a fake, and having to sort of stand up to that and say that to her. It's sort of such moving scenes with Graham in this episode. And then that scene at the end as well with Graham and Ryan, when Ryan finally calls him Grandad, is just such a sort of fantastic, beautiful, emotional moment, really showing the character development through this series of how all the companions have sort of really developed as characters and really kind of come closer together throughout the series. And I thought that was just a fantastic moment to end on. But yes, so introducing this idea of the solid tract energy, this solid tract universe, this alternative universe, this not kind of parallel universe, I guess you'd say. And it's nice to see parallel universes explored again, because although it's a great idea for sci-fi, actually in Doctor Who it's pretty rarely explored. Like, we have it in Inferno in 1970, you have it in Rise of the Cybermen and An Age of Steel in 2006, alongside a little bit in Doomsday as well. And apart from that, there's like hardly any parallel universes in Doctor Who. at least from what I can remember. I'm sure you can probably list off another 5 because you're all better fans than me. But for me, I can't really remember many, so it's nice to see that idea explored again as well, even if it's to a relatively small capacity, focusing on a kind of fairly small core amount of characters in this episode. But it does just sort of set up, obviously, a nice conclusion as well to this story. And I think one of the strengths of this story as well was Jodie. I think she had some really, really good scenes. I was really thinking sort of towards the last sort of 15 or 20 minutes or so of this episode, you felt she really, really came into her own when she worked out exactly what was going on, why none of them were real and why it was all a fake and everything, and having to try and convince Graham that Grace wasn't real, and sort of arguing with the Solitract and trying to kind of understand, sort of almost trick them, as it were, a little bit. And then that sort of quite almost surprising moment, I think, at the end of the episode when she kind of decides that she's willing to offer the Solitract everything. She's willing to offer all her knowledge and everything to the Solitract to sort of if the Solitract would let everybody else go. And so I thought that was kind of quite the Doctor being quite sort of self-sacrificial, which we haven't seen very, very much of in Doctor Who at all throughout its history. Of course, the Doctor's always tried to help, but never really at the expense of giving over all their knowledge to the enemy, the villain, the alien, essentially. And so I thought that was quite a sort of bold step to take from the Doctor, and obviously the writers writing this, coming up with this idea for this story. But I thought Jodie really, really owned the scenes in that regard and was really able to sort of give some really powerful sort of words and speeches and that kind of thing in that sort of the denouement of the story. And then finally, I think it's fair to say was what was probably one of the most controversial scenes of not only this episode but this series, the frog scene, which I was a little bit thrown. Obviously, if you follow me on Twitter, have seen my tweet. I posted a tweet which was from the preview that Doctor Who TV had written. Quite a good website for Doctor Who sort of news and opinions and everything like that. It's quite good. Go check it out. And they said that this is an episode you do not want to miss. Don't watch it on catch up. Don't watch it on iPlayer. You must watch it live. You wouldn't believe me if I told you why you sort of don't want to miss it. And obviously, it's because there's a sentient frog. A frog that's a sentient universe that is actually the villain of this episode that's talking as Grace. And you just wouldn't believe that before you actually saw it. It's just bonkers and crazy. And so yes, once obviously everybody's been sent back, the Doctor's accepted that she's going to offer all this knowledge up, suddenly the whole universe just disappears into pure whiteness, which I thought went the sort of archway, which I thought was kind of really, really, really effectively done. It almost felt almost a little bit like she's gone to heaven, as it were, gone into this sort of magical, there's just this void of nothingness she suddenly ended up in, just facing this frog on a chair, which is what it ultimately turned out to. I literally was, as the sort of camera was starting to kind of focus from behind Jodie into this chair and what was there, I was really like staring down the TV, trying to catch a glimpse of what it is. And I did not expect it to be a frog. That is the most crazy of ideas. It really, really is. But I think, yes, it's a little bit maybe funny and comedic and a bit surprising, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea. Personally, I thought it was just funny, crazy, bonkers Doctor Who. Like, it's just the sort of thing Doctor Who would do. Like, and given that the crazy stuff we'd already had in this episode, like sentient universes, the fact that it can manifest itself as a frog, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just no surprise really to me. That's well, it is a surprise, but doesn't seem sort of implausible in that regard, like some people have been trying to say. Yes, I can kind of understand people's opinions saying that if the Solitract should have been somebody that could actually convince the Doctor to stay, a former companion or the Doctor's parents or granddaughter or something like that, and I can understand that viewpoint. I can. Practically, the main reason they didn't do it is because this series is all about being new and fresh, and we don't want to bring back old characters. And based on this series so far, it wouldn't have made any sense for them to bring back an old character in that regard. But you could see the kind of compassion that the Doctor had in that situation as well, even though she knew that she had to leave because even she wasn't able to sort of stay in this universe. She was going to get torn apart and disintegrated or something like that because it just wasn't possible to have the two sort of universes clashing even in a small capacity, although maybe the Doctor isn't that small a capacity. But I thought that actually the frog wasn't the most terrible idea. Yes, it was a bit crazy and maybe a little bit kind of what to start off with, but I think when you kind of look back at it, although it's a bit bonkers, it does make some sense. Well, yeah, the logic's explained there that it kept Grace because why not? And Grace likes frogs, so it's going to be a frog because why not? It's a sentient universe. It can do whatever it likes. And it decided it was going to be a frog. And so, yes, maybe the animatronic aspect of the actual frog, the physical sort of prop, wasn't the greatest prop in the world, shall we say, and sort of maybe slightly took me out of the scene just because I was kind of like, this isn't very good. But in terms of an idea, I didn't really have any problem with it, and I thought it was just kind of again doing the whole not what you expect from this episode. It was one of those episodes you just kept on twisting you away from what you're expecting it to be. It was the last thing you thought you'd see when the Doctor started walking down this corridor to some mysterious something, was a frog, and I think that just kind of summed up the episode, that it was all about what you didn't expect. And so overall, I think it just sort of made for a fantastic, enjoyable episode, to be perfectly honest. I really, really enjoyed this one of my favourites of the series. It just kept on twisting and turning every which way. You didn't know what was going to happen next. I thought all the main characters put in a very, very strong performance. I thought sort of Ryan had a nice bit of stuff to do with Hannah. The only person who maybe didn't get so much was Yaz, because she just ended up being paired off with the Doctor and not doing that much, unfortunately, in this episode. I do kind of stand by my thoughts that 3 companions is probably too many, and that they'd be better off cutting one of them out and down to 2 companions, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen in the finale at the very least. We'll have to wait and see on that. But overall, yes, as I say, I really, really enjoyed it as an episode. It was just bonkers, classic, crazy Doctor Who that you're not going to see on any other TV show. But what about you guys? What did you think of this episode? Did you think the frog was a step too far? Or was it a fantastically enjoyable story for you? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments below. But that's it, guys. We've only got one more episode to go, sadly. Next week, the Battle of Ransor Av Koloss, whatever that even means. It's a pretty blooming clunky title and not that great, and a little bit of a shame, I think, for this episode that it didn't end on any sort of cliffhanger or anything leading into the finale. So the finale is going to be very much standalone in that regard, but I'm still excited to see what's going to happen. And I don't know if you'll be pleased to know, but I am planning to live react to the episode this Sunday. I'm afraid it will only be me, not Megan, as well, but I will be giving you my live thoughts on camera as it happens, and probably reviewing as well, I'm sure. But other than that, guys, from this video, remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another one. Goodbye.